Hey, happy Friday everybody. Ryan here again. Second time I recorded this video because the first time I was using the wrong microphone and it sounded terrible. So here we go again for me. Anyway, now this is going to be a little bit in depth. I wanted this video to be all about workflows, and the reason I'm doing this one is because I started to do some 101 introductory type videos and they were getting a lot more traction than more of the advanced stuff that I was doing. So I thought I'll start to go a little bit more basic and build from there. So this video is all about workflows. If you've wanted to know workflows in detail, stay with me because I'm going to get real deep into workflows. So let's jump straight in. So workflows. What I like to do is I like to teach you how to sell to customers, right? In like the way that you would demo software to anybody that's potential prospect whilst working through workflows, right? So yes, snapshots can contain pre-built workflows, blah, 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 right? But the power of you being able to build a workflow in front of someone whilst doing a screen share session like this is what's going to get you from someone that's interested to essentially signing on the dotted line right then and there. So I'm going to talk about workflows in detail, but then I'll also talk about how you sell them, right? So let's have a look. Let's start from scratch. Now, workflows used to be a combination of campaigns and triggers, right? And then what they essentially did is they consolidated those two modules to be workflows. Campaigns and triggers are essentially deprecated, but triggers are extremely powerful, and there is still functionality as of the time of recording this in triggers that doesn't exist in workflows, because I'm guessing some of the technical limitations around workflows, whereas a trigger can be universally fired from a lot of other conditions that exist outside of the contact existing in the workflow, if that makes sense. But anyway, so they're not 100% deprecated, right? Triggers still have their place, but campaigns and triggers as a combination can be largely replaced by workflows. Rightio. So the first thing you want to do is give it a name, right? So I'm going to do, this is my cold calling workflow, right? I'm a bit of an outbound guy. I have an outbound agency. And so running multi-channel outbound workflows is our bag. It's what we do quite a bit. So apologies if there's a lot of stuff that relates to that. But anyway, let's go deep. So we've got the actions, right? Which any new trigger will fire the workflow, right? But you don't need a trigger. You can leave this blank, right? Because you can enter a contact into a workflow anytime you like. With the settings of a workflow, the default settings for email can be set here. So if you're not overriding each email element with a new sender ID, then it falls back to whatever's been set here. If you would like to put a time window on, you define it right here. This is super important. You know, if you have something that's very continuous and autonomous that's running like a cold email, or follow-up type thing, right? Making sure that it's only running on business hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever it is, super important. Make sure that this workflow cannot be fired outside of those time windows, right? Now, for testing purposes, you're always going to want to be able to allow multiple, right? Because if I'm going to test this with contact that exists in the system, you need to be able to send one contact through a workflow more than once, right? Because you're probably going to test it more than once. If you are building a workflow that is related to appointments, if a lead books their own appointment more than once, this is not impacted, and this is why they built that functionality, which isn't affected, right? And they mention it here. If this has anything to do with getting engagement, then you might want to eject the contact from where they're at within your workflow at any point in time if they reply. So if they do, then take them out of here and do something, right? And then from a conversation point of view, maybe you don't want to get bombarded with messages. This will be largely dependent on the use case and the vertical that you're selling into. Can be useful for some, but otherwise just leave it as it is. And then of course with the workflow sequence management, it talks about an event start date. So this is extremely powerful and can't be understated. You can build an entire workflow that is time relative. So if you're talking about a webinar, for instance, and you're sending reminders progressively as you get to the point of a webinar, maybe that webinar is starting on August the 26th at whatever time. Everything can start and finish and happen contextually and relative to that time. So using weights and things like that as you're building a workflow is incredibly powerful. And, certainly can't be understated, right? Once we've put someone through this, we'll talk about the history and the status, right? The history is essentially a log of every single execution that happens. So many history items to one contact, and the status is one contact, one record, tells you exactly where one contact is in the current state of them being processed in any workflow at any one point in time. You will not see any workflows that are not published, right? So make sure that if you're working and trying to execute a workflow from anywhere else, even inside the own workflow, it needs to be published to be able to see it. Okay, jumping straight in. So again, we talked about triggers. You don't need a trigger, right? But you can have one, right? So let's just say that we added a tag, and as soon as we tag someone with blue, right? Talk about someone checking into an event. Someone scans a QR code, they get tagged with blue. Send an SMS, welcome to the event, whatever it is, right? Infinite number of possibilities. There's a good example of talking through this, right? If I was talking to an event manager. So we say, yep, they came in and we gave them a tag as booked, which means that they scanned the QR code on the way through to the event. Now we want to send a SMS, right? Now I'm going to do a voicemail, right? Because I like voicemail drops. Voicemail drops are amazing. I use a tool called Vocaroo, and I just demo this to customers straight away. And I'm like, we can send a voicemail drop. We go bang, record that voicemail, and then download it as an MP3 file. And now I've lost my spot. And then off we go. We upload the MP3. And this is going to be welcome to the event voicemail, right? Now this could be real estate. This could be a call block, right? So I'm going to switch a couple of different use cases as we walk through this, right? And then the SMS is going to be welcome to the event, right? Keynote is happening on stage 3 at 10 a.m. right? Don't miss it. And of course you can put in contact values and blah, 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 right? So that's not what I want to show you. We all know that there's lots of cool functionality around external communications and so forth. But knowing that you can do a lot of external communications. So think about it, external communications, anything that's going out, not to do with the staff. A lot of questions I always get from customers, well, how do I get notified of something, right? That is going to be an internal notification, right? Don't confuse that with what you're doing from the external communications. You don't send yourself an external communication. You send staff internal communications, right? Okay, so under the external communications tab, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. Now a manual, let's change it. We're not doing events anymore. Let's do real estate, right? So a real estate has a receptionist or a front of office person who is tasked with doing some of the more manual, laborious work that they have to do in real estate, right? So they take a bunch of names, they add them into the system, and then they call them to follow up. Are you still interested in this property, right? So what we're able to do is we're able to say, okay, well, let's drop them a voicemail, which is, touching base, right? Voicemail. So we pre-recorded that voicemail to say, hey, it's, whoever from whatever real estate, we were touching base about this property, blah, blah, blah. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait just a minute. And of course, if you're testing things, don't put in 30 minutes to test things, put in 1 minute. So those time delays, you can actually test them in a short amount of time. I'm going to have a slight delay between the voicemail and the SMS follow-up. So the SMS is going to be, were you still interested in the property you inspected on Saturday? Right. Whatever. And then the wait is required to see if they reply to things. So I'm actually going to need a reply, and it's going to say which element do you want to wait for a reply for, and I'm going to time that out after 2 hours, right? So give them 2 hours to respond to something, and if they do, then we can do something else, right? Make sure I'm publishing anytime I want to test that. So, you know, if this was in draft mode and we want to see this workflow from any other menus that have workflows, that's not going to appear here, right? So cold calling, not there, right? So once it is published, then it does appear in that list, but because I'm already in the same workflow, it's not going to allow me to add workflow to the same workflow, but it will be in that list from somewhere else. Okay, so let's just get rid of that trigger. I'm not going to need it. I'm going to manually enter people in here in a batch process. So my use case now is, rather than calling everybody at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to enter them into this workflow. So you've got your 10 people that you need to follow up with. You're going to drop them a voicemail. You're going to wait a minute. You're going to follow up with an SMS, and then you're going to wait to see if they respond to that or not. Now, if they don't respond to that, you can use conditional statements. So all workflows is essentially what software programming is, which is you pass information into a condition, and that condition evaluates to true or false. And then based on where it ends up, is, you know, you present them with some information. And does this information meet the conditions that you're presenting to me? Yes, it does. That's a 1. No, it doesn't. That's a 0. 1s and 0s. It's binary. It either evaluates to true or it evaluates to false. So that's all we're doing here, is we're passing the information in to see if it meets the conditions or not. So we're going to say, okay, well, did the contact reply to the message? Yes, they did. So we don't need to follow up because we'll go and check what the reply was. If they didn't, what we're going to do is we're going to say, cool, well, we need to set a manual call to call them back, right? So I'm going to say call back. So that's my callback list. That's a manual call. And then I'm just going to do a task. And I'm going to say, this is call whoever the contact is back. So call them back, call back, no answer, no response. Okay, and then assign it to whoever, me, assign it as a day later, blah, 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 blah. Great. So already what we've got is we've got a pretty sophisticated workflow. We've got the labor of calling people removed, because if 85% of calls result in a voicemail, why do the call in the first place? Send the voicemail, wait a minute, send the follow-up SMS, wait for the reply. If we don't get a reply, call them back, right? Then do the manual call. But automate the first bit of it. Only call them back if they're not calling you back, right? Turn that outbound process into an inbound process. Okay, don't underestimate the go-tos. So go-tos are extremely powerful. Then it gives you the ability to take someone from anywhere and create loops, right? So you don't want to end up with a diagram with 50 million elements on the canvas. It becomes way too complicated to debug. You want to create a bunch of smaller, manageable workflows and connect them based on where someone evaluates to in any one workflow given a point in time. Go-to will enable you to then connect back to the start. So, you know, I could create a loop, right? And again, think about this from a programming point of view. If you need to just loop someone through until they evaluate to true on any condition, that's exactly what the go-to is allowing you to do. All right? Extremely powerful. It's basically like visual programming, right? Which is just extremely powerful. Now, the test, right? So set yourself up with, you know, an alias like I have, right? So I've got an alias. If I run a test on myself, now it's when you can start to get into the debugging. So the history is going to show multiple records for one contact, right? So, you know, I've been added. So bottom up, right? 1013, I've been added. Then we sent a voicemail. Then we're waiting, right? Now, I would test this with somebody else that didn't have a phone number, right? So let's just do a +2, I think it is. Don't have a phone number on this one and want to see what happens when you run on that person, right? So this guy, Jordan Michael, he has a phone number. So I just got a voicemail, right? Cool, missed that. That's all working. Happy days. This guy, it was skipped. So if we look at the detail of why it was skipped, it will give you why. So it says, okay, it tried to execute this action, it was skipped, and it was skipped to the fact that it had no phone number. So GHL as a system will evaluate what's happening in each element and tell you the reasons why it was successfully executed or why it errored out, right? Usually, it's going to be pretty straightforward. It can't send an email without an email address, it can't send a voicemail without a phone number, or, it attempted to write to a phone number that doesn't exist or whatever, right? And it usually knows what it was that's causing the issue. So this is extremely useful for seeing, what's happening with a particular contact at any one point in time. Now you might say, okay, well, that's all well and good, but where is, Jordan Michael up to, right? So that's the status. So now you can actually just find anybody and where they're at. So I can search for one contact, see where they're at. Now they're sitting in waiting for contact reply. And then we can see the whole log if we want. So those two things kind of go hand in hand, right? And if you want to, you can actually force them out of wherever they are and force them to the next one, right? So if you were testing this, you really wanted to keep your 30-minute window on your weights or whatever it is. When they get to that weight, you can just go and force them to the next stage of that workflow. But this is essentially how you debug what's happening inside a workflow at any one point in time. The full breakdown of every single step exists here, and where someone is in the process of that workflow exists here. So one record here per contact, multiple records per stage or step per contact record here. And of course you get the ability to be able to filter on when people entered into the workflow itself too, because you end up with thousands and thousands of records in here, of course, right? Okay. I've made this a lot shorter than what it originally was, but back to the actions. No underestimating the selling power of some of this stuff, right? Externally, think of any channel in which you'd like to communicate with a customer on, we can do that. Then you talk about enrichment. So not only do we communicate on any channel of your chosen customer, we can, based on their behavior, start to enrich the information that we have on them. If they give us a phone number, we might extract the phone number out. We might say that they've clicked on a link, they've watched a video, they've done something, and so that behavior informs us that they're a warm lead rather than a dead cold lead. And so all of that enrichment that we can do in CRM land, being customer relationship management, is extremely powerful. And of course, when you get to the end of this, you could add them to another workflow, which is go off and do something else and connect all of those workflows together, right? Being able to create and update opportunities in any pipeline based on how they're interacting or responding to things is also extremely powerful, right? This is automated lead management, which not a lot of CRMs can do this easily, right? So this competes head on with, even HubSpot and Salesforce and those types of things that are massively complicated, really, really big dinosaurs. And this just gives anybody the power to do this type of stuff. It really does democratize this type of work for anybody in small business, right? Being able to just send review requests automatically to get, Google My Business reviews, which then turns into leads, which then turns into increased revenue growth. That is massively powerful. Be able to take charges versus over SMS through Stripe. This could be, I've just done a deployment for a beauty salon where instead of having the FPOS terminal, they're sending the review request sending the Stripe charge via SMS, they're taking payment, and then they're sending the review request straight away. So each customer is being asked to leave a review. So not only are they generating all their revenue online safely through Stripe, they're then getting their reputation automated and getting their reviews, and they're responding to those reviews, right? Audience remarketing, feedback loops into the marketing teams, or if the marketing team is them or you, making sure that those paid channels that they're investing money in, the audience intelligence is continually becoming smarter, right? Any existing customers or prospects that are engaging with you and your brand are always going to analytics and AdWords to create remarketing audiences that you can then get in front of in their feed for Facebook for the next 90 days or however long the cookies are lasting, right? Facebook pixels, etc., right? And then the most powerful element of all would be the webhook, right? So being able to do something with a webhook then gives you the ability to have the conversation with customers, which is, we can do anything, right? So if somebody replies yes to this message and this and that and the other, then we could go and turn your smart kettle on or turn all the lights off in the office if they reach the end of this journey, right? Every time you close a deal, we can turn the light on over there or turn the fridge on to make the beers cold, whatever, right? Because webhooks give you that ability to start integrating with literally any system on the face of the planet, right? So this cannot be understated. And this combination of being able to use webhooks with the workflow system inside GHL makes it probably one of the most powerful pieces of software that kind of exists at the moment for business. So take it, use it, run with it, do amazing things with it, and impress your customers and become the oxygen in which they need to run and fuel their business growth. So if you like this video, please support me by giving me a like and a subscribe. I do have a few others. Hopefully they're floating around because we are at the end of this one. Check them out. And I hope to speak to you soon. And if you've got some really cool things that you've built, please share them with me. I create this stuff just to give back to the community because I'm super passionate about it. I look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great weekend. Bye.